So in this mini presentation, I'll just be explaining the 6 Ps, what they mean, and how they really are the basis of a project proposal. All right, so I will just go over them very quickly and then I'll delve into them with more depth after I just go over what they are. So the first 3 Ps, we have the problem. So what is the problem that you'll be focusing on in your research? The second P is population. You have to think, who specifically does this problem impact or affect? The third P is paradigm. And you have to think, what research can you use to help you develop a rationale for your plan? So however you choose to fix this issue, the problem at hand, you'll need to have research that proves that the way you're fixing it will work. Going on to our last 3 Ps, we have the plan. What plan of action can you develop? And remember, everything you plan regarding how you'll fix this issue has to be based on research. And that's really what's established in your paradigm section. The next is patron. This is the person who will be funding the project. Oftentimes students will choose a person who's affiliated with some sort of a foundation, but you should be writing to the person who is in charge of grants. But you have to make sure you're considering, why would this person or their foundation that they are associated with be interested in funding a project of this type? So you want to make sure that their interests overlap with what you're researching and trying to fix problem-wise. Lastly, we have price. What is your estimated budget for fixing this project and making sure that it's rolled out in a professional way and has everything that it needs taken care of? How can you justify this price using research? And one thing to keep in mind, I know it is day one and it is the very beginning, but you do not want your price to be astronomical. I always tell students there really should be a cap for a proposal of this size at $1 million at the very, very most. Some of the better proposals that I read have lower budgets and it makes them more reasonable for the size of the proposal that you'll be working with. All right, so let's just go a little bit more in depth regarding the 6 Ps. In order to start this project, you must first identify and choose a problem. This is a class where you get to be autonomous, which means that you are choosing the research topic of your choice. It just has to be in a scientific sort of category since we're in scientific and technical writing. You might feel the urge to immediately come up with a plan, but for the purposes of this class, you must simply stick with identifying and quantifying the problem. So quantifying is a really important word that we use in this course. So you want to make sure that you can justify that the problem that you're choosing exists. So you need to make sure that you're able to offer proof. Are you able to offer this proof? Can you also identify a population who are also affected by this problem? Can you provide information about how many people are affected? A lot of times students will also provide detailed information about the population and what characteristics they all have that sort of contributes to them sort of suffering or being impacted by this problem. And you want to make sure you're showing your audience, how do you know? So that's really what I mean by quantifying, and it's extremely important in order to have a successful and sophisticated proposal. Going into the term paradigm, I'm sure you've heard this term before, but I always like to expand because I have a lot of students who struggle with this term. So the very most basic definition of a paradigm is a research-based rationale that answers the following 2 questions. So the very first thing I want you to think about, remember, in its most basic form, it's just a research-based rationale, but remember, it should respond to these 2 questions specifically for the proposal that we are writing. How do you know that your plan will solve the problem? Remember, offering your opinion will not work here. Offering that research will really add substantial proof and add credibility to your argument. And two, why try to solve the problem this way, the way you've chosen in your plan, rather than any number of other ways? So there are going to be thousands of ways in which you can solve a problem, and you'll start to see that once you research. Your goal is to try to find 3, maybe 4 ways that you think are most successful. And then what you'll end up doing is you'll kind of blend them into a hybrid plan of your own. But you need to make sure you're justifying why you're choosing those ways to solve it over the other 100 that exist, if that makes sense. The bottom line is, and this is really what I want to warn you of going in, we have this tendency and we want to come up with our own solution to a problem. So when we see a problem, we think, how can I fix that? And that's the key word, how can I fix it? You are taking you out of it, and you really want to not think about how you would want to fix it hypothetically, but how the research has shown that a solution will work. So instead of you trying to offer your own opinion, you're really trying to take yourself out of it and rely on the research to prove to your patron, the person to whom you're writing, that your solution is thorough, it's substantial, and it will work. So remember, we have to first do this research on our problem and find out what other plans have been previously successful. And that's what we're building off of. Once we have this data that shows how these plans have been successful elsewhere, that's when we can start to use these paradigms to guide our own projects. Once you have these different paradigms, they're like models of success. You will use the research you've done to help guide your own plan, and you will combine some of the ideas that you found in your research with your own unique ideas in order to create a plan that's original and creative. You will be citing all of your research. These are all of your paradigms, your models of success, maybe pieces of theory, a great deal in your project proposal. Remember, we always cite, whether it's word for word, a quotation, or even if you're just paraphrasing. But you must use the research that you find as a rationale for your plan. The patron. When considering who you are going to choose to fund your project, who this patron will be, you want to consider a few of these questions just to make sure that you are choosing the right person. Why would this person be interested in your project proposal? How are they affected by the problem? They may not specifically be affected, but like I said, if they're part of an organization and that organization cares about your population, let's say your problem that you're choosing is adding more exercise programs in elementary schools because kids are tech obsessed and they're not exercising enough. You would then try to find maybe a patron that cares about kids and exercise, or kids and physical activity. And there are a lot of foundations that you can find that really care about that. Even if you're focusing on an inner city school, you can find specific foundations that care about inner city education, and that might be a good foundation to look at. So consider those things. A couple of others. Do they have the actual money to back your plan? Remember, some of these grants, some of these individual people might only say they have $20,000. If your plan you think is going to cost $320,000, it's not going to work. So you have to look into that as well. Would they be interested in offering you such a large sum of money? Most of you are going to be asking for a decent chunk of money, and you want to make sure that your patron would be engaged and more than willing to give you this chunk of money. And also, you want to make sure that they know how they would benefit from partnering with you. So that's just all things that you should consider when you're choosing who will fund the project. The last thing you really do is price, and you'll have a very general idea by the time we get to the midterm, but your final proposal will really have a more detailed breakdown of the price. It will continuously evolve, so kind of figuring this out still, that's pretty normal. You'll use all of the research that you're doing as a guide to help you develop what you need. Some of you will need to pay people for salaries. Some of you will need materials. Some of you might need to pay to rent a space, whatever it might be. But you will come up with a very concrete and detailed budget by the time you hand in your final proposal. So these are the 6 Ps. I recommend reading chapter 1 of the Magrino textbook. It's extremely detailed and it will help clarify anything that was a little bit vague in this presentation.